Boxing has a huge problem on its hands when it comes to its championship belts, and it's severely damaging the sport's credibility and marketability. The WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO, often mockingly referred to as the alphabet soup organizations, are the main culprits here. Their rankings are muddled, their belts are diluted, and it's leading to a situation where the best fighters in each division aren't necessarily facing each other. Now, hardcore fans will know there are a couple other ways champions get crowned. The Ring magazine hands out belts to the fighter they consider the best in each weight class. And of course, there's still the notion of the lineal champion, the boxer who beat the last guy to hold the consensus crown, who beat the guy before him, and so on, in an unbroken chain going back to the division's inception. Think of when Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko. Fury became the lineal champ because Klitschko was considered the man. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to zero in on the main offenders when it comes to the confusion and convolution, the four major sanctioning bodies, and the mess they've made of the title picture in boxing today. How did it get this bad? What are the implications for the sport and its athletes? And what, if anything, can be done to fix it? How we got here? To understand where we're at now, we need to rewind the clock nearly 100 years to the 1920s. This was when the National Boxing Association, which would later become the WBA, first emerged to begin ranking fighters and awarding championships. For many decades, they were the only real game in town. If you held the NBA/WBA title, you were the man. But by the 1980s, cracks started to show in their reign. Allegations of corruption were rampant, with stories of the organization's president taking bribes from promoters to juice their fighters' rankings. Famously, Bob Arum admitted he had to slip cash to the WBA to get his boxers ranked properly. Enter the World Boxing Council in 1963, ostensibly formed to be a more reputable alternative to the scandal-plagued WBA. They quickly gained a reputation as the belt to have if you were the best in your division. Unfortunately, they weren't immune to many of the same shady practices that took root in the WBA. Around this same time, a man named Robert Lee saw an opportunity. After failing to secure the top spot at the WBA, he splintered off and founded the IBF in 1983, marketing it as a totally transparent and above-board sanctioning group. That facade didn't last long. Lee ended up in federal prison in 2000 on racketeering and money laundering charges related to his activities with the IBF. The last of the major four, the WBO, burst onto the scene in 1988, also promising to be different and better than the rest. But by this point, it just felt like more of the same. Another governing body jumping into the fray to siphon off sanctioning fees without doing much to actually guarantee the best fighting the best. So that's the sordid history that brought us to the convoluted landscape we have today. You have four different groups, all with questionable track records, putting their stamp of approval on world champions left and right. But a few belts here, and there could be manageable. What really makes the current situation untenable is just how splintered it's all become. The problem in practice. Let's use a mainstream sports analogy to really drive home how absurd the title picture is in boxing currently. Imagine it's the NBA playoffs in 2024, and we get to the conference finals. In the East, it's the Celtics vs. the Pacers. Out West, the Mavs are going up against the Timberwolves. But then, nothing. No championship series. The league just says, you know what? Let's call it here. Congrats Celtics, Pacers, Mavs, Wolves. You're all NBA champs this year. The Larry O'Brien Trophy gets mailed out to all four teams. Nobody has to prove they're better than the rest. That's it. See you next season. Sounds absolutely nuts, right? Well, welcome to the world of boxing championships. Okay, so it's not quite that egregious. Most weight classes don't have four separate title holders. But it's not at all uncommon to have the top 2 or 3 fighters in a division holding belts from different organizations, with no obligation to face off and determine who's really the king of the hill. That's the biggest issue here. Without a sole governing body that can mandate challengers and unification bouts, you end up with a system where the best simply don't have to fight the best. Even within each sanctioning group's own rankings, you rarely see them force their champions to take on their top contenders in a timely fashion. Just take a gander at the heavyweight picture, as I'm recording this in early 2025. Alexander Usyk holds the WBA, Super, WBC, and WBO belts. Daniel Dubois holds the IBF belt. The WBA also recognizes Kubrat Pulev as its regular champion, while both the WBC, Ajit Kabil, and WBO, Joseph Parker, have interim champions. It's a complete mess. Why isn't the WBA insisting Usyk and Pulev face each other to consolidate those titles? Because this way, they can charge sanctioning fees on 2 world title fights in a glamour division rather than 1. It's a complete farce, and a slap in the face to the very concept of championships. The system actively works against clarity. Usyk became the first undisputed heavyweight champ in 25 years by beating Fury in May 2024. The IBF stripped him just 1 month later for taking the contracted Fury rematch instead of their mandatory. Canelo Alvarez suffered the same fate at super middleweight, stripped by the IBF in July 2024 for not fighting their guy. The organizations prioritized their rules and fees over undisputed champions and legacy fights. The situation is so bad that BoxRec, the sport's de facto record keeper, stopped recognizing WBA world titles in August 2024 due to the confusion their multiple champion system creates. They've maintained this stance into 2025. Belts losing meaning. This crazy proliferation of titles in modern boxing has done a ton of damage to the prestige and meaning of being called a world champion. Think about it. What does it really signify to be the regular champ when there's a super champ above you in the same organization? What the heck is a franchise champion? A label the WBC cooked up a few years back. Does the interim label carry any real weight? And this is just at the top of the pyramid. When you factor in all the silly secondary titles the Alphabet Boys have come up with to extract even more cash from fighters and promoters, it gets downright laughable. The WBA has an interim gold belt, if you can believe that. The WBC hands out silver and diamond straps like candy. It's become all about branding and semantics rather than results in the ring. You can call yourself a world champion without proving you're the absolute best guy out there, because depending on the weight class, there could be a half dozen other so-called champions floating around. Compare that to a sport like the NFL, where there's one clear path to a championship, one trophy to strive for, one banner to hang in your rafters proclaiming you the best of the best, or the FIFA World Cup, where every nation knows exactly what the stakes are and what it will take to stand alone on that podium every 4 years. In boxing, the closest you can come to that level of clarity is by unifying all the titles, something even many all-time greats never managed in their careers. And these days, if you do pull off that feat, the glory is often short-lived thanks to the competing mandatory obligations each sanctioning body saddles their title holders with. So not only are there too many belts, watering down the very notion of a championship reign, but even those rare fighters who manage to round them all up and achieve undisputed status are quickly pressured to give up that distinction or risk being stripped. As it stands now, you could argue that no boxer is ever truly undisputed. They're all just renting space atop the mountain until the next nonsensical mandatory challenger comes knocking. Current champion landscape as of early April 2025. Looking at today's championship picture only reinforces the points I've been making. Undisputed status is incredibly rare. In the men's divisions, Nalia Hinu, super bantamweight, remains the only current undisputed champion across all weight classes. Alexander Usyk held that distinction at heavyweight for about a month in 2024 before the IBF stripped him. Dmitry Bivol unified the light heavyweight belts in February 2025 by beating Artur Beterbiev, only to vacate the WBC strap weeks later to chase a rematch instead of facing his mandatory. And Canelo Alvarez lost his undisputed super middleweight status in 2024 when the IBF took away their belt. The women's divisions have fared somewhat better, with undisputed champs like Katie Taylor, Claressa Shields, and Savannah Marshall. But they're still the exception rather than the rule. Meanwhile, the WBA's farcical interim titles remain in plague despite a pledge to abolish them back in 2021. And many glamour divisions like welterweight and lightweight are still fragmented across multiple title holders. Recent controversies and upcoming fights. The inherent issues with the current system continue to rear their ugly head. In March of this year, we saw Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach Jr. battle to a highly controversial draw for a WBA lightweight belt, with an apparent knockdown of Davis going uncalled. Many felt Roach was robbed of the title. Then in April, just weeks after unifying all the light heavyweight straps, Dmitry Bivol vacated his WBC belt to pursue a lucrative Beterbiev rematch, rather than face his mandatory challenger. While you can't blame Bivol for wanting the bigger fight, it underscores how the competing interests of sanctioning bodies, promoters, and fighters often run counter to crowning one true champion. Looking ahead, there are some big fights on the docket for the rest of 2025. Jaron Ennis and Imantas Stanionis unify welterweight titles in April. Canelo Alvarez will try to regain his undisputed super middleweight status against William Skull in May. Alexander Usyk is targeting a summer showdown with Daniel Dubois to consolidate the heavyweight belts. And the women take center stage in July when Katie Taylor rematches Amanda Serrano for the undisputed super lightweight crown. But for every division that has the potential to be unified, there's another where mandatories, politics, and diverging financial incentives threaten to further dilute the championship picture. Even now, the WBO is considering a petition to let Usyk fight Dubois before facing their mandatory Joseph Parker, highlighting the never-ending push and pull these organizations are engaged in. The necessary solution. So how do we fix this mess? In a perfect world, it's actually pretty simple. You centralize power, creating one worldwide organization to handle rankings and titles across all weight divisions. You set fair but firm rules around mandatories to ensure consistent title defenses against deserving challengers. And most importantly, you only award one belt per weight class, guaranteeing that anyone who calls themselves a champion has earned that designation by beating the absolute best their division has to offer. No more regular, super nonsense. No more hiding behind lesser belts while avoiding your most dangerous rivals. In this dreamland scenario, every boxer enters the ring with a crystal clear understanding of what they're fighting for and what they need to do to be recognized as the king of their weight class. Those championship belts regain the prestige and meaning they've lost over decades of splintering and politicking. Most importantly, the fans can tune into a big fight confident in the stakes, knowing these two combatants represent the best of the best in their division, fighting not just for a strap and a sanctioning fee, but for true supremacy and sporting glory. The harsh reality. The current fragmented championship structure exists because various organizations saw an opportunity to get their piece of the pie in the form of sanctioning fees that promoters have to pay to have their fights recognized as title bouts. If we were to somehow unify all the titles tomorrow, that would necessitate taking power away from the executives currently sitting atop their various organizational thrones. It would mean having one president instead of four who could wet their beaks with the proceeds from big title fights. It would mean fewer belts to go around, and by extension fewer 6- and 7-figure paydays just for the right to put a certain patch on your trunks as you walk to the ring. So the people nominally in charge of maintaining the integrity of the sport actually have a massive financial incentive to maintain the status quo, no matter how silly and detrimental to boxing's long-term popularity it may be. And even if you could somehow convince these organizational heads to play nice, you'd likely get serious pushback from the promoters and fighters as well. Don't forget, the more belts floating around out there, the more champions a promoter can have in their stable to use as bargaining chips in negotiations for big fights. From the boxer's perspective, while it might be better for the sport as a whole to have one lineal champ calling the shots, on an individual level, many pugilists are just fine having multiple paths to a title. Why risk it all against a monster like Usyk or Fury if you can campaign for that paper regular strap instead, and still tell your friends you're a heavyweight champion of the world? Conclusion. So unfortunately, while the solution is simple, the execution is anything but. There are simply too many entrenched interests profiting off the current system. Too many egos unwilling to cede their little slice of control for a major streamlining to happen organically. It might require government intervention in the form of legislation like the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act, which sought to protect fighters from exploitative business practices, or perhaps the emergence of a transcendent, dominant champion in the mold of a prime Mike Tyson, who could demand the belts be unified to legitimize their claim as the true king of their division. But short of that, I just don't see how we untangle this web anytime soon. The alphabet soup is here to stay, much to the detriment of a sport I love. But hey, I'm always open to other ideas and perspectives. Let me know in the comments how you would clean up boxing's championship messes, or if you think they even need cleaning up at all. This is definitely a debate with a lot of room for spirited disagreement. Just do me a favor and hit that subscribe button before you head to the comments. We've got a lot more hard-hitting boxing content coming your way soon that you won't want to miss. Thanks for tuning in, fight fans.